Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us today. The mental health community has yet to formally classify midlife crisis as a psychological impairment with real world consequences. Research suggests that MLC can involve symptoms similar to depression, identity crises, and even dissociative states. Like other conditions that impair judgment, such as manic episodes and bipolar disorder or temporary psychosis, MLC often leads individuals to make reckless decisions that they later regret. Midlife crisis is often dismissed as a cliche, but the reality that you're going to hear here is far more serious. During this period, individuals experience a profound psychological and emotional upheaval, leading to impulsive and self destructive decisions. Despite the clear signs of instability, MLC individuals are currently allowed to file for divorce, sell homes, and make irreversible financial and legal choices, often to the devastation of their long term spouses and families. But thank you for joining us today because now you are going to hear from people around the world as they tell their story from bomb drop and beyond. Has your spouse come home and said to you, "Hey, honey, it's over. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Um, you know, maybe I never loved you. I really don't like the way you closed the lid on the mayonnaise jar. Um, maybe we never should have gotten married." Has your spouse come home and said stuff like that to you after 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Well, if so, go to our friend's website at midlifecrisismarriageadvocate.com. On there, you're going to find a quiz. You can take that quick little quiz and see if perhaps your spouse is suffering from a midlife crisis. And there's a ton of resources on there if you find that. So check it out, midlifecrisismarriageadvocate.com. The stories and events discussed in this podcast are based on our guest experiences and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. They should not be considered legal, medical, or professional advice. Any names, locations, or identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. Any similarities to actual persons living or dead or real events are purely coincidental. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the podcast creators. Listeners should consult with a qualified professional regarding their own circumstances. Hey guys, today I have somebody very special with me, and she had been married for 29 years. Her husband had a total MLC, and affair partner is Jane's best friend. But Jane's going to tell you how she persevered through this and found much better love and happiness despite all this, and has come out just smelling like a rose, much bigger and better life. And the other two are just, no, well, we don't even worry about them. Anyway, here we go. Here's Jane. All right. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. It's really exciting to be on your show.
Thanks. All right, so I know you've got so you can go ahead and tell us
All
your
right.
little story here.
I'll
Oh,
go
wait,
on with
first
this.
first I do wanna go roll it back. I do wanna know how you first met your ex-husband.
Oh, I was encouraged to go to a Christian college, and so I did. And
Mhm.
I wanted a Christian spouse, and I met him there. So we have lots and lots of friends in common. We were born and raised in the same town, although I didn't know him when we were growing up. But we had lots of friends in common that we both knew. It seemed like a really good match, and we were born in the same hospital, even.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, his dad was a minister. His parents were married over 60 years. My dad died in December, but they've been married 63 years. So we were both from really good families that had been married a long time.
I'm sorry about your dad,
Thank you.
but what a blessing to have families that have, I mean, that's wonderful.
He was
Very.
such a great example. My dad was the best.
So you guys met in college, and
We
then
did.
you dated through college and I guess got married after?
Yes, we got married right after college, and my he was a manager. He got into management very quick, and we lived in 4 or 5 different states. I traveled him around. I gave up my career because he was following his career, and I stayed home with the kids for the most part. And there were some years I was a teacher and I did some part-time work, but for the most part I was a stay and by the time he left me, he was very successful. My income wouldn't have made a drop in the bucket at that time. So I didn't really see a point in working on that in my late 50 early 50s.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. And did you see anything coming up, like, any changes in his personality or things like that
I
before the
did. His mother died about 6 years before the MLC, when I saw the MLC. His mother
Uh-huh.
died. He did not shed a tear and said he wouldn't really miss her. I thought that was weird because I really liked her. And then, he started thinking he was a wine connoisseur and ordering fancy wines and cocktails and making cocktails at home, and he lost weight and started dressing really more dapper and young and I didn't think about any of this. We were finally empty nesters.
Yeah,
I thought he was having fun. Why not?
yeah.
So I saw some of that. Yes, I did. And he became sort of impatient with my parents. They're he became more critical of people overall,
Hmm.
and that was not like him. So
And he knew your friend?
he did. I met this other woman, and we became very close. I was an only child. She was an only child. We had a lot in common with her and her husband, and we became really good friends with them. And I was so grateful to have such a good friend in my old age. And we had them over on Christmas Day because they didn't have family, and we went on vacations with them. And I trusted her implicitly. I really did. I didn't have any antennas up at all. Her husband was a really good guy, and she never said anything negative about her marriage.
Yeah. Oh, so about how long were you guys friends? Like, the 4 of you?
About 4 years.
And you did vacations and things together and all that kinda
Just a
stuff?
couple. It's not like all the time, but they were
Yeah.
close, yeah. So,
And
there
then so do you wanna tell us a little about bomb drop, how that happened? And
there wasn't really a real bomb drop. A friend of mine called me and let me in on the fact that they were texting inappropriately with one another, and somebody had witnessed this, and so I waited till he was asleep and checked what I could and found evidence to that effect. And from that day on, his whole personality flipped. He
wow.
became surly, quiet, wouldn't talk to me, quit touching me. And then, I'd try to talk to him and he would say he's trying to decide. There's a lot of similarities between people having an affair and MLCers. And I'm still
Mhm,
not sure it's an MLC, but they're so close. The Venn diagram has so much overlap, it's hard to know.
mhm,
I'm a Christian. The Bible talks about don't let yourself be deceived. And I always thought that meant don't let yourself be tricked by like somebody wanting to replace your roof. Don't be tricked. And I've learned since then our minds are completely malleable, and if people can let themselves believe anything they want to, and they
right.
can
And
they can
and you
re
wanna believe probably the good stuff, you know what
well,
I
I'm
mean? Like,
talking about him. He could people
oh,
rewrite when you're having an affair, you can rewrite history, and you can totally believe you've never been happy, that you never loved your spouse.
mhm,
And they're hook, line, and sinker, completely deceived. And I don't think this is something that we're taught about when we're younger and happier, that this
mhm,
can happen because we think we have strong minds that will never trick us. That
yeah,
the limerence sends you into a state where you tell yourself lies just so you can justify what you're doing.
right, exactly. And we all get to a point where once you're educated in MLC and this whole or even being with a narcissist or, there's certain thing
Mhm.
patterns, and then you realize, "Oh, that behavior lets them be off the hook," you know?
Exactly. Mhm.
So, it got to that regardless?
It
So,
didn't matter. It didn't matter what I said. He was going to believe what he was going to believe.
absolutely. Yep. And you guys
So
have adult kids?
we do. They were empty net they were out of the house, and I thought, "Wow, this is our time," and, everything fell apart right at the beginning of the COVID lockdown. Believe it or not, I was kind of excited for getting to be at home every day with him. I was thinking, "This is gonna be fun."
Right.
And for him, it was a prison because he could not go out and see the other woman.
Mm.
Does that make
So they
sense?
yeah. Do you know how long they were seeing each other before you found the messages?
Inappropriate stuff, probably a year or 2 they were I don't know. I don't know exactly,
Wow.
but I think long enough that pretty soon, as soon as the bomb drop day happened, he was waffling enough that his mind was pretty much made up. So he'd been thinking about it for a while.
I'm so sorry. I know it's so horrible,
Yeah.
because your life just changed right then.
Well, and it was COVID lockdown, so you couldn't go to a therapist in person. There were no marriage weekends, no marriage encounter weekends. There was nowhere to go for help.
Uh-huh.
Um, we couldn't even go on a date to try to do things together. You couldn't go anywhere. It was awful, and he felt like he was grounded. And
Uh-huh.
so that's when I learned about midlife crisis and started reading. And but like I said, he was pretty much already decided by then. But
Uh-huh.
this is where I'll tell you this story. He told me with very concerned that he thought I was a covert narcissist. He also told me I was emotionally abusive and toxic, and he kept throwing these things out with no real reasons why. But it sent me into a tailspin. I started reading about covert narcissism and worrying about, was I a covert narcissist? And thank goodness I had adult children who told me, "Mom," they said, "You're not a narcissist. You and dad have been happily married for many years." And they assured me I was not. And then months later, I found how they were texting one another. And in those texts, the other woman told him I was a covert narcissist. And it's kind of like, Trina, it's kind of like someone saying, "Oh, she's a Scorpio. Of course she's going to do that. She's a Scorpio." And
Uh-huh.
everything I did, of course she did that. She's a narcissist. And I could have met Mother Teresa and gone to India to take care of orphans. And they would have said, "Well, of course she did that. She wants to feel important. And that's what narcissists do." So I was playing a losing game and I didn't know it. And I just want everyone out there.
Absolutely.
I want everyone out there to know you are being talked about in the negative fashion, whether it's true or not. And you
Uh-huh.
don't have a full picture. The only people that have a full picture are the cheater and his affair partner.
Uh-huh.
They have the whole picture. You don't. You're working with,
Yeah.
half a pie. You're not
Right.
working with a full deck. And so you're never going to make sense of it.
And because when she was your friend, when you guys would
Mhm.
hang out and you trusted her as your best friend, did you ever see that she would act weirdly like that with other people? Did you see
She was really
character flaws?
fun. She was
She was
fun and, really friendly, and she gossiped a lot about people. She always knew what was
oh,
going on with everybody. But, looking back, she didn't talk about herself much. She didn't talk about her history. She didn't
uh-huh,
talk about her past, about any insecurities she might have. She was very closed, and I realize that now.
okay, but she was a little gossip.
Little gossipy, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, which is not Christian, like.
No, and she never talked about God. She has the spiritual life of a gnat. I mean, she never talked about God or philosophy or bigger ideas or anything. It was all about fun, which I think at the time maybe I was having a little I just wanted to have fun. I was done with the kids, and I wanted to have a good time with these new
Yeah.
friends of hers.
To
And
finally go out without babysitters. You can finally
yeah,
go out without,
I wasn't.
worrying about,
Yeah,
"Oh, did they take the car out last night?" or whatever.
yeah,
But,
right.
so, that must have been really upsetting to be sitting there reading messages. Did you say on Reddit or something? And that's where you were seeing the conversations and she's calling you certain things. And I mean, how did that feel when you're reading this?
I felt vindicated because I realized I was not crazy, that this stuff was going on.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Here's another story. My car broke down one day, and my husband at the time had complained to her that he had to leave where he was and come help me. And
Mhm.
she said, "Ugh, I can't believe that. Why doesn't she call AAA?" Well, I had called everybody, because I didn't want to bother him. He was an hour away. But she
Mm.
just kept saying, "Why didn't she do this or that?" Well, if I would never bother my husband if my car broke down because I'm just independent that way. And she built herself up to be this fictional, I don't know. In real
Almost
life
everything you're not, in a way.
she would definitely call her husband. She's just lying. They just
Right. Right.
they play this game. Your spouse, if they're in an affair, the affair partner is doing this stuff to groom them. They're being groomed.
Yes.
Not and this is going on, and I got to read it, I got to see it, and I was just like, I am not crazy.
Wow.
And then my second thought was, do I really want to be with this man? If I lived with him for 29 years and some other woman can convince him I'm a narcissist
Uh-huh.
and tell him I'm a bad person because I called him when my car broke down.
Mhm.
Do I want to be with him?
And he was still living in the house when you saw these messages? Was he still living at the
No, he had moved out.
Oh, okay, okay.
He had moved out, and this is where I get into the point that I did not stand. I decided not to stand. I had a daughter who was a newlywed who was watching me. Um, I I have a lot of self-respect for myself and I deserved better. He knew right from wrong, and
Mhm,
because it was involved a close friend, I just wasn't in the emotional place to stand and watch this go on and
yeah.
wait. I just didn't want it. So I filed for divorce and then they immediately began. I knew this because I could see his American Airlines stuff, but they were traveling all over the world, taking trips together during COVID. I don't know how, but they were. So,
Wow. How did you pull yourself out of you decided to not stand because of all those reasons,
uh-huh,
and do you know how the timing of that? Was that within the first 3 to 6 months or
uh-huh. Yeah, he moved out to live with his sister, and that's when I found out he was staying in hotels with the other woman, and he had taken her on a business trip. This was before he left the house. He had taken her on a business trip unbeknownst to me.
Mm,
And so, yeah, I filed pretty quickly. At first, I put a retainer down thinking it would get his attention.
mhm,
And then that didn't get his attention. And then I filed and he signed immediately. So if you decide to make a boundary or lay down the law or do something, you better make sure that why you're doing it, that you're not doing it out of anger or spite or trying to change their mind. Because if they
mhm,
call you on it, you're going to be stuck with those consequences.
mhm.
And those were consequences I was ready to deal with, and I did not regret doing what I did. But they're like teenagers. They're gonna look right at you and do what you're saying. They don't care. They're gonna do it.
It
And,
sounds like you really lost respect for him by that time, and
I
he was
had
not the man you married and fell in love with.
not a bit, not at all.
Mhm.
And so this is, I've done a lot of reading and studying. This is a lot of cognitive dissonance to deal with when you're married to somebody who does this. I read things like the runaway was it the runaway husband?
Husband? Uh-huh.
Yeah, that book. I read everything I could on midlife crisis, on attachment styles, on affairs, on affair recovery, and I just learned a lot. And this is what I wanted to share today, more than what my ex did to me, because you can read those stories all day long and twice on Sunday online. They're all the same. But there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who really know where they stand. They have good self-confidence. They know their place in the world. They are securely attached. They had happy childhoods. They had good relationships within their family.
Mhm,
And those are the left behind spouses. We are strong people. We are sure of ourselves. And if you can picture the left behind spouses, we are strong people like boats with an anchor. Here we are, we are on the boat, we have an anchor, we know where we're going, we're secure. The other type of people, they are insecurely attached. Either they're avoidance. We have learned online on our support groups, a lot of these people are avoidant, conflict avoidant, people pleasers. They're not securely attached. They have some sort of childhood trauma or emotional neglect. And in my ex-husband's case, I think he went along his whole life and did what was expected of him.
mhm,
He followed all the rules, and they will attach their little boat to a stronger person's boat. They're just bobbing along. They're just trying to not rock the
yeah,
boat. They're just bobbing along in the ocean in their little boat, and they see someone strong and they attach their boat to you, and that works for a long time.
mhm,
But something makes the bomb go off in midlife. They look around and they don't know who they are, and they don't know what they like to do, and they don't have a secure sense of self, and somebody else comes along to make them feel really good.
mhm.
And they don't
But
have
you know
the
what? Actually,
what?
Jane, I feel like the person that comes along may be the same non-secure person.
Yeah. Yes.
They sort of
Yes.
are attracted to that
Mhm.
trauma-filled type person.
Right. Yeah, which is probably why marriages made out of affairs hardly ever work out, because 'cause you've got 2
Mhm,
kinda screwed up people. But this is what we're dealing with, and the secure spouse, the left behind spouse will never be able to wrap their mind around it. You can try all day long but you can't because you're not wired the way they are wired, and it's kinda like the perfect cocktail. You have to have the right person with the right childhood, with the right life circumstances. Not every man has a midlife crisis or midlife person has a midlife crisis,
yep,
but some do, and why is that? Because they've had the perfect storm of things happen in their life to create this. And And what I've had to tell myself, because I tend to ruminate on why, and try to understand it. And I thought to myself, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but
You're the
I heard
guest. You're
okay.
supposed to be
I heard
talking.
I heard the other day about like Edison, like tried like 900 times before he made a light bulb. We have these people, we are so inspired by their stories, people who run ultra marathons, people who against the odds have beaten something. And we look at them and we applaud and we say, "Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. They're great people." So grateful there's somebody who has that kind of persistence to invent the light bulb. But I don't feel the need to read books and try to figure out why they're like that. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? It's only
Yep.
when somebody does something really heinous that we're like, "Why are they like that?" And we try to dissect it. You can't.
Yeah, you know what?
I
That's exactly why, like, true crime has
Yeah,
the following it has because people are just curious as to what makes people do this, you know? What
right.
is wrong in somebody's head that makes them act a certain way that most of us wouldn't do, you know?
And we follow that thread when somebody does something wrong, but we very
Mhm.
rarely follow that thread when somebody is off the charts, crazy successful. But, I just we need to cut that thread because you're not gonna understand it. You're just
Yeah.
not. You're wired differently. You're a secure person, and you would never, ever do something like this to somebody,
Mhm.
and that's the difference, so
Well, I understand you have met somebody and you are now married, right?
I am, and that's another thing I didn't follow the rules on. Because it was COVID lockdown, I was stuck at home for months,
Mhm.
like, by myself. I mean, I went to work and I came home, there was nowhere to go. I didn't go out with friends, but there was nowhere to go, it's COVID lockdown, and a lot of our friends overlapped. I didn't know who to trust. So but I did have a good friend, and she's at one point told me, she's like, "You're gonna have to internet date," and I was like, "Oh, I don't wanna date." But I was bored, and she told me Facebook had a dating site, and I quickly threw together a profile just so I could look around. I was curious, and this guy started a lot of guys, I got like 50 likes. I was overwhelmed. I was about to just shut it down, but one guy texted me, and he was really smart, and after a couple days, he asked me, would I like to meet him for lunch? And I was about 3 months away from my divorce being final, and I said, I'm still technically married." My husband, my ex was a vanisher. He wasn't a boomerang.
Mhm.
There was no hope that, he was missing me. He was not. Anyway, I met him for lunch, and to make a long story short, a year later, we were engaged. And now we've
Aw.
been married almost 3 years. He was really patient with me. He let me grieve while I was developing a relationship with him. And he had teenage children, and after I got to meet them, we would go horseback riding and zip lining and hiking and frisbee golf, and it's just what I needed to get outside
Aw.
and do something fun and stop, you know, obsessing on my predicament.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
So, and that's not for everybody. I know they say you're supposed to wait like forever and be completely healed before you date again, but
But your
if
body
you
knows,
huh?
you know. Y They say the body knows. You're like you know when you're ready. Your mind knows, your heart knows,
I
and
don't know. I don't know if I was ready, but I kind of thought of, if having your marriage implode like this is like a car crash, they send you home in another car while you're still healing from that car crash. and and this was a car crash, and that some people are afraid to ever get in another relationship again, and I couldn't look at it like that. Not everybody is a bad person. Not everybody will betray me. I don't know anybody that I went to college with whose husband did this to them. I guess I'm the unlucky one. So, it was just a bad, crazy car wreck. So,
I really like that analogy. I think that's perfect because you're right. A lot of people are scared to get
yeah,
back in the car, you know? But,
yeah.
might as well get back in the car.
I got back in the car and I had a broken arm or whatever, but he was like, "Wow, you looks like you've got a broken arm. Tell me about it." He was a great guy. He was a
Oh.
good he's wonderful. So,
Aw. So, wow. So you guys have been married now, what, like 2 or 3 years?
almost 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to
Eh
believe, and I was able to move out of the state where there were so many triggers where we lived before, and I was glad to get out of there and to start totally fresh.
so you
Um,
both knew, was he in this same area where you were before?
he had only
So
been
is
there
this
for a
a
couple
fresh
he had
start
only
for
been
both of you?
he had only been there for a couple years. He had retired out of Alaska and moved down to Texas.
Oh,
And
nice.
he'd only
Okay.
been there a couple years, and there was nothing really holding him there. So when I suggested we move, he said, "Let's do it."
Oh, that's
So
awesome. So you got a
yeah,
total fresh start, new
total fresh start.
friends and neighbors and all that kinda stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And this is another thing that I think left behind people will discover given time. Because at first I was just heartbroken and crushed, and I thought my marriage had been perfect and beautiful, and I was so happy. And after you've been out of it for a while, or especially when you find a healthier person, you realize that your midlife crisis person did have an emotional wall up, but it was normal for you. You didn't realize it at the time
Mhm.
that they are
I
conflict.
felt like that, like an invisible wall.
Yes, an
And so
invisible
now with
wall.
your new husband, there's no wall?
No, and I talked to you a little bit about this before the show. My ex-husband was the youngest of 4 and very conflict avoidant and a people pleaser, very passive. Sometimes I wished he wouldn't have been so passive. I wanted him to take charge, and he was just so easygoing, and that, fooled me. I thought he was happy.
Right.
Um, and then my current husband is the oldest of 3, and
Mhm.
he's been an officer in the military, and he's much more he'll tell me when something's bothering him, and he will create conflict when there's something wrong. And at first I thought, "Oh, no, we're gonna fight and get divorced because there's conflict," 'cause I I didn't know what to do with it. But now I find it refreshing. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that you told me this bothers you, because I would much rather you tell me something bothers you and let me fix it than never say a word and then one day tell me I'm a terrible person
Right, right.
and
After
not give me."
25 years.
Yeah, and not give me an opportunity to fix it?
Mhm. Yeah.
So
And he was married before, right?
who?
You're
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
do you know if his was it the same for his previous marriage? Could he was he
No,
I
no.
was she receptive to his to that, or do you think she was an avoidant? I guess that's my question.
Oh, they just had a lot of conflict in the relationship, and they had gone to a lot of counseling, and I think they finally just called it quits.
Oh.
Like I said, he's a very dominant personality. He's very masculine. He's very assertive. And if he married a woman who had those same characteristics, they'd be butting heads all the time. And I tend, because of Laura Doyle, if you don't know about The Empowered
Mhm.
Wife, which I have read extensively, and because of her skills, I was able to remain in my feminine energy and be respectful to him. He gives me anything I want.
Aw.
He's an utter sweetheart. I just have to know how to approach him instead of head to head butting heads. There's a
Mhm.
there's a gentler, easier way, and she's helped me do that. So
Oh, that's awesome. And
yeah.
it's really nice you have somebody now he's the man and could take care of you, and,
Yes.
that's really
Yes. He's very much like that. It's really great to have a man like that's really confident in himself and
mhm.
secure. Yeah.
Well, so, for our listeners that are thinking, "Oh, I'll never be able to get back in the car," do you wanna give them any advice about that? If they decide, or, maybe a lot of people are standing, and then, many do switch over to, "You know what? I'm not gonna stand anymore," or maybe they'll stand, but leave the door, or they'll stop standing, but maybe leave the door open and sort of focus on
Yeah.
themselves, which is so important to do.
As I've been on the support groups and all these years and read, I think there's 2 kinds of standers, and there's the kind of stander who does it out of guilt
Mhm,
or fear. They're so afraid to step out of their own, and
mhm,
so they're just gonna stay where they're comfortable and hope that, against all hope, that their spouse might snap out of it. But then you have the really secure standers like Kenda, Ruth,
mhm.
who is it Kendra? Kenda. I always get
Kinda.
my
Mhm,
Kenda.
mhm,
And she knew exactly who she was. And
mhm,
she, stood her ground, and she wasn't in a hurry, and she didn't really care what he was doing, and she improved herself and detached and all the things that you're advised to do. She did the right thing. And those are the standards that are emotionally healthy. So
mhm,
when you're standing, you need to know exactly why you're standing. And if you think it's if it's because you're scared, afraid, and then you need to reevaluate that and really think about that, because it is scary. It's the scariest thing I ever did. I did not want to file for divorce.
mhm.
I lost my house. I had to leave the house. The other woman lives there now. I lost my insurance. I lost my circle of friends. I'm an only child. I lost all of my in-laws and my family. I lost a lot. And I knew that by walking out, I was giving up all of that.
But you
Um,
know what? You really Jane, I hate saying fake names, but, um, but the thing is, you lost all that, but you found yourself, and to lose all that, as you're calling it, in quotes, you
yeah,
lost all that, but you found so much more,
I,
the strength
I,
that you decide I mean, you believed in yourself. That's a lot of courage and bravery to say, "Gosh darn it, I'm doing it," "I
yeah.
don't deserve this. My life needs to not have this in it,
Mhm.
and I deserve better." And you did it.
Well, God is moving around all the chess pieces, but you can't be an immovable chess piece in this, I had to allow myself for God to move me to where he wanted me to be. And meanwhile, he was moving around my husband's chess pieces, my current husband,
Yeah.
so that we could meet. I don't think it was an accident.
Aw.
Um, the timing was crazy, and I just had to be open to that. And it is scary, but I think there's a plan for each of us, and you just got to figure what that plan is. And if your plan is to stand, more power to you. Just make sure you're doing it out of a healthy place.
Exactly. It's so
Mhm.
true. And did you find you were letting yourself just be open to, like, when your friend said, "Check out the dating sites, Facebook and all that," and you were just, you
Yeah,
were leaving it open to do that?
yeah, I was just curious. I was like, okay, I'll check it out. That might be kind of fun to play around on that. And of course,
Mhm.
I told when I met my husband, I was like, I'm not looking for anything serious. And he says, well, I'm not either. I just want someone to go out to dinner with occasionally. Well, we were either both liars or just fell totally in love with each other. But
Oh, it sounds like it was just an instant love connection. You can't
It
fight it,
wasn't like limerence, though, it's different, so when you read about limerence, I wasn't, like, head over heels, I was just like I kinda
No,
had
it sounds like you guys were comfortable together, like, just
I had check boxes in my head, and he met
aw,
all of those, and so
nice.
that's what I would say, when you get into another car, don't get into a Pinto, if you really wanted to get into a BMW, that's what I wanna
Mhm.
say. So
Yeah.
you have to have an idea of what you're looking for. If you want a partner who's gonna go to church with you and who believes, what you believe or whatever, don't date someone who is not that type, and
Right.
if you don't wanna be with somebody who has small children, don't even go on a date with someone with small children.
Mhm.
Why? It's a waste of time. So I kinda had this checklist in my head, and he filled so many of them, that I the more I learned about him, the more I was like, I think I'll just stick here for a while and see what happens is what.
Aw. And, speaking about how things happen that way, was he new to that Facebook dating thing too?
Yeah, he was pretty new. He had been dating a little bit. He had moved to my town a couple years prior. He was living with his sister while he got established. Then he found his own place. But as he said, as he was dating these people, he said women our age are kind of crazy. He was finding a lot of emotionally crazy, nutty people. And I did tell him with all honesty, because I had been married 29 years, and that's not an accident. I said, I am not crazy. I'm very stable.
Mhm.
Um, my ex-husband's crazy right now, but I said, "You won't meet a more s" and my family, my mom and dad are still married, I come from a good home, and I think that's why he liked that, the
Mhm.
stability. So
Aw,
and I
that's
think
funny.
I'm sorry, I think all left behind spouses, we are not the crazy ones. I think
Oh, well, for sure. I
yeah,
know. When I
we can
studied attachment styles, I was like, "Oh, well, that's a no-brainer. I'm secure." You know?
yeah, exactly, and they're gonna make you feel like you're crazy. They're gonna tell you stuff that you can't match it and make anything make sense,
Mhm.
because it's just circular arguments and crazy they don't have a reason. They're just unhappy.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you went through the storm,
we're
and you came out, saw the rainbow, found your little pot of gold, and you're in your new environment with an awesome new husband. Let's see, let me make sure I've asked you any other little questions. Well, one question, h how has this experience changed your views on relationships, marriage, and self-worth?
oh my gosh, I've become such a stronger person, and I'm more empathetic, and
Mhm.
I'm ashamed to say, growing up as a Christian my whole life, when I saw marriages fall apart, I thought divorce was preventable, which is kind of laughable now. I just thought, oh, they just didn't work hard enough. I never was told somebody could just, flip a
Walk
switch
away.
one day and walk away.
Yeah.
So I'm much more empathetic to people's problems that they find themselves in like this, which I'm glad for. And what was the other part of the question now? Oh, relationships. I've learned a lot. I got the Laura Doyle book thinking if my ex came home, I could work on that, but he never did. And the first time I got in a big argument with my current husband and I kind of freaked out, I got the book off the shelf. So I've learned a lot about communication and staying on my own paper. And I've just become a better person, I think, through
Mhm.
all of it. I don't think I was a bad person before, but I just I'm a more mature, emotionally grounded person now.
Uh,
Mhm.
well, being somebody who knows what it's like to have a wall
Mhm.
between
Mhm.
the other person, I am so happy for you that you're with somebody now and there's no wall between the two of you guys. You can have a real relationship,
Mhm.
110%, you
It's
know?
refreshing. It's a little scary because you do get in more conflict. If you've been used to a conflict-free
Mhm,
relationship, suddenly you think, "Oh, there's something wrong."
mhm.
If it's healthy conflict, you're not screaming and cursing at each other, just regular conflict.
Yeah. At
It
least you know where everybody stands.
you know where everybody stands. And
Mhm.
you feel so much
And there's
closer.
no resentment building up in somebody. Contempt isn't a thing. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Oh.
Unspoken resentment, unspoken expectations, all of that from my other marriage that I didn't even realize was going on.
Mhm,
And I should have because there's no such thing as a conflict-free relationship. And I guess it was conflict-free because I was getting my own way, even though I wasn't demanding my own way.
mhm.
Um, he said he even chose restaurants based on what I would like. And I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me what you liked?" He goes, "Well, I just wanted to go where you liked." Well, you can't do that for
Yeah.
29 years and not be resentful.
Yeah. Well, you know what? No wonder he had an identity crisis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. At some point, I want a man who's strong enough to say, "No, I really want a burger." And
Right.
I'm gonna go, "Okay." Well, I mean, I don't know what he thought was gonna happen if he told me
Mhm,
what he was really thinking.
mhm.
Because I'm not an angry, disagreeable person, but I don't know. Like I said,
Yeah.
we'll never understand. You can't understand.
No, you exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. We just have to put it out there.
yeah.
So, well, Jane, thank you so much for joining us today, and, best of luck with your new marriage,
Thank you.
and your new
And
community and everything, and maybe we'll check in with you in a few years, see how it's going, if you
great.
got any grandchildren. Your daughter just got married, I guess, a while back, so
She
yeah.
did have a I did have a grandchild in December.
Oh, is that your first?
Yes. Yeah.
Congratulations. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
awesome.
and I'm really excited for your podcast. There's not anything out there right now like this. Well, I guess that wife
There's a
expert
few of us. Yeah.
there's a couple of you, but there's not very many, and there's not a lot of resources, but if you
I
want, I'll give
know.
you resources. You can put them in the description, all the
Thank
stuff I've
you.
read and looked at, but I think it's kind of a waste of time. You're not gonna make sense of it, so
Mhm.
instead of reading for hours and hours all this stuff, go out and, fly a kite, do something else.
And, start enjoying life and
Yeah,
just go forward.
yeah,
And because you are the epitome of a forward moving spouse who just did it and,
and
and it
I
can
don't
be
wanna make it
done.
sound like I was happy, it was all and there were times I had horrible days, I would just cry,
But you
my
know what? You kept putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And that's all it is.
Yeah. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but one day you look back and you see how far you've come. You'll get there. It's like
Exactly.
and I've told people it's like swimming across the lake of Jello. You cannot swim through Jello. You can't get there any faster. You might as well flip over on your back and float in the lake of Jello, and one day you'll be on the other side.
Mhm.
So, it's not any fun. It's not fun, but there's no shortcuts.
But you got there.
I got there, and I know everybody listening can get there too. I really believe that.
Ah, all right. Thanks,
Thank you,
Jane.
Tina.
Wait. Oh, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today. As we heard from Jane, that was her best friend that she trusted with her husband. And, that was really devastating for her. But she moved forward and she believed in herself. It reminds me of a quote that I just read the other day. New beginnings often come disguised as painful endings. Trust the process. And trust she did. She's now married to somebody who's her total best friend, a better companion for her. She's They moved to a new state, she's got a new community, and just a whole bunch of new adventures that she's been able to experience and that lie ahead as well. So don't be afraid to start all over again. You may like your new story even better. So I'm Trina Laird, your host of Midlife Crisis, Bomb Drop, and Beyond. Thanks for joining us today, and I'll see you again soon with more bomb drops. All right, guys, take care.